Hello, I'm John Hudak. I am the chef at Pickering House Inn, and since everyone's doing a lot of cooking at home, we wanted to share a recipe for potato gnocchi. So let's get right to it. We're going to do 3 potatoes, Idaho potatoes, which is roughly 2 pounds worth. And to start off, we're just going to poke them all over with a paring knife. You can use a fork or whatever you have just to put a bunch of holes in them, and this is going to help vent out the steam as they cook, because what we're going for is a kind of dry texture, and the less moisture it has in there, the better our texture will be on the final product. These potatoes are also a little bit older, which we find works a bit better in producing that kind of dry, flaky interior when we bake the potatoes. So if you have some older potatoes laying around, this would be perfect for that. And I have an oven preheated to 450 degrees that we're going to put these in for about an hour or until we poke it with a skewer, and it's very easy to push through. A couple other items that you'll need for this recipe. So for the equipment, we have you'll need a potato ricer. This is just to push the potatoes through and get the right texture, and then this is a food mill. So either one of these will work. We like these in a commercial kitchen because we can do a large volume and it's easier when we're making larger batches. So either one of those you'll need. A bench scraper, which is going to help work the dough on the table. We have some kosher salt. We have 1 egg yolk, which is about right for the 2 pounds of potatoes. And then we have some flour. You can use AP flour. What we like is 00 flour, which is an Italian flour that's made specifically for pasta or gnocchi. But if you can't find that or don't have it, you can just use AP flour, works fine. We also have a little gnocchi board. So that's optional. You can use a fork, or you don't have to do it at all. It's just to provide those ridges on the outside that helps kind of catch some of the sauce. And that's about it. So I'm going to pull some potatoes that we already have from the oven, and I'll show you how to put the dough together. Alright, so these potatoes are looking good. They're kind of crispy on the outside, goes right through, nice and soft on the inside. So we're just going to cut them open, use a paring knife. And you want to take them out of the oven as soon as they're ready and cut them as soon as they come out of the oven. You do not want to let them sit for any amount of time, or else all that steam that's coming out right now will become trapped inside the jacket of the potato and it'll kind of get a little soggy. So we want to open these up as soon as they come out. Alright. Now those are steaming up. I'm going to grab a spoon. And I have my food mill, and so we're just going to scoop out the interior. We really want to scrape those skins to get all that nice dry meat of the potato away from it. And this is a potato recipe, but there's other ways to make gnocchi with squash. You can do like butternut squash or pumpkin. There are sweet potatoes, which you can use. We like just regular baking potatoes because, again, it has less moisture, so that means that we have to add less flour. It tastes more like potatoes, and it's kind of just a little easier to work with. If you are doing something like sweet potato or something that has a little more moisture, you can, after you cook them, let them hang in a dish towel overnight in your refrigerator to kind of drain off any of the moisture. But for these, right out of the oven into the food mill or the ricer if you have a potato ricer, that works too. Alright, so once we have them all in there, just going to wipe off the counter. And we're just going to mill them right onto our work surface. So a cutting board, or if you have a nice large table, that's probably the best way to do it. Alright, once I push it all through, it's going to take my bench scraper and scrape off anything that's clinging on to the food mill. Alright, and once I have them on my work table, I'm just going to kind of move them around a bit. Again, the idea is to Just get all that steam coming off of them and kind of letting them evaporate a little bit. Alright, a piece of skin. So now I have my potatoes all milled out. I'm going to give them a little handful of flour. And so the amount of flour is something that is going to be a little bit by feel. So I'm just kind of giving a generous covering of flour. And then I'm going to just drizzle some egg yolks kind of all over the place there. And again, the less egg yolk we use, the less flour we'll have to use, and then the more potato flavor it will have. So I'm just going to take my bench scraper, and I'm just going to start chopping it in. I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly. The less we have to work the potatoes, the better the texture will be. If you tend to overwork this dough, it becomes kind of sticky and kind of gummy. So we want to try to avoid that. So I'm just trying to incorporate that egg yolk in there by chopping it in. And now I'm just kind of taking a look at and evaluating the texture and the amount of moisture that we have to work with here. And that's all going to depend on the exact size and weight of your potatoes, the amount of egg yolk. Eggs are different sizes, how long the potatoes were baked for. So this really changes. So there's not a real specific amount of flour we're going to add. It's mostly by feel. So I'm kind of looking at that. So I added my first amount, and I'm going to go ahead and add my second addition of flour. And I'm just going to kind of fold it a couple times. And that seems to be about right. So it's a little bit forgiving. So I'm just going to kind of push it together a little bit here and there. And it should just be slightly tacky. It shouldn't be too crumbly. And if you do this a couple times, you'll kind of get the feel of it. So once I have it, it can kind of roll on the surface without sticking. I can push my finger into it. It doesn't spring back. That means that we haven't really made it too elastic, and it's probably the right texture. So I'm just going to scrape off anything extra that didn't get worked into the dough. All right, I'm going to wash my hands, and then we're going to show you how to roll the gnocchi and shape them. So I'm going to cut a little piece of dough off. I'm going to get rid of a little piece of skin in there. And I'm just going to roll it into a little rope. So I'm going to start on the inside and roll it out. Now I'm doing this without flour, so it kind of helps pull it on the table and has a little bit of friction to it. All right, so once I get into the shape I want, and you can do it large or small depending however you want them to come out, I'm going to dust it lightly with some flour, or maybe heavily with some flour, and that's going to help it from sticking when I cut it. All right, so once I have the floured rope of gnocchi, I'm going to use my bench cutter and make sure it's nice and clean, and that's going to help get a clean edge. I'm just going to cut it into little pieces. And I'm kind of using a cutting motion as I do it. And if you need to wipe the edge of your blade, or if you have like an older knife that you don't mind getting banged up a little bit, you can use a knife. All right, and then I'm just going to hit it with a little bit more flour. And now you have a couple options. Either you can just leave them like this, and you can cook them just like this, or you can take them another step, which is to roll them into little balls like that. And this would be more of the traditional shape. It's depending on how much time you want to spend on these. Once I have them into little balls, I'm going to use the gnocchi board. I'm just going to put them on the board with my thumb. I'm just going to roll them forward. And that's going to make a little divot, and it's also going to make a little ridges on the outside of it. So if you want to kill some time and have kind of more of the traditional shape, you can go ahead and do that, or you can just cook them as they are right there. So I'm just going to finish rolling out the rest of this dough. Again, no flour when you make the rope there. And if you get a little too skinny, you can kind of just roll it back, and it kind of is forgiving as you shape it. Again, flour, roll it again, so it's coated, and cut. All right, next up I'll show you how to cook them. So we are going to cook the gnocchi and make them into our finished dish. Right now it's the just beginning of spring, so we're going to do a little springtime preparation here. I'm starting off with some chicken stock, and it's probably about a quarter cup. And this is more about the technique of how to do this than a recipe. You can make this your own. We are making a beurre monté or a butter sauce. So we're going to use a good amount of butter. We like Vermont Creamery butter for this. It's really super tasty. And we're just going to heat this up with the chicken stock. And the idea is to kind of keep it moving as we go and to keep the creaminess of the butter and the emulsification of the butter as we cook it. If you don't have chicken stock, you could use a little water, but the protein in the chicken stock does help to keep the butter emulsified into our sauce here. So this is really just a simple butter sauce. I'm also going to add some diced prosciutto. You can use any kind of ham that you have, just dice it up. We went with prosciutto to kind of stick with the Italian theme here. We also have some peas here since it's springtime. You can use fresh peas, you can use frozen peas. Alright, we just have that over on a medium-high heat. I'm just going to kind of stir that. Just until it starts to get a little thick. Alright, so while this is heating up, we're going to cook the gnocchi. I have my pot of boiling water here that's been seasoned with salt. I'm just going to add some gnocchi to it. And so you'll know when these are done because they start floating. Pretty easy. And while those are in the water doing their thing, I'm just going to continue to stir and move around our sauce here. Their ham and peas. If you wanted just to do plain butter and cheese, that is also delicious. The idea is to showcase the fresh gnocchi that you just made. So if you see on the sides here, we're starting to get some nice kind of bubbling, and it's starting to look a little bit thicker. This is from the butter. And I want to leave this just a little bit under reduced from where I want to end up being, because I want the gnocchi to finish cooking in this sauce here. So it has a nice chance to stick to it. Alright, you can see the gnocchi are starting to float. I have a little spider here. You can use a slotted spoon or whatever you have, or a little strainer is fine. You just want to be gentle with it. So I'm going to go right out of the water. I'm going to give them a little quick drain because that water is pretty salty. I'm going to add it right to my pan. Alright. So now here you just want to be really gentle. I'm just going to kind of stir it around a bit. I'm just kind of looking at the sides. It's starting to get a little thicker, you can tell by the way it's bubbling. If you want to add some herbs in here, chives or something like that would be nice. And just like that, you see the bubbles in the middle. It's starting to look a little thicker. I'm going to turn it off right now. I'm going to kind of give it a quick taste. Seasoning and some of that salt from the pasta water has kind of seasoned that butter. Depending if you're using salted or unsalted butter, it's going to make a difference too. So always taste it to make sure you know what you're seasoning. And you can tell I just have a little bit of sauce, a little bit loose on the side there. And while it's off heat, I'm going to add some Parmesan. You can use fresh grated. We do big chunks and grate them ahead of time so they're ready to go as we need it. I'm just going to kind of sprinkle it all over. And give it one more kind of shake. Maybe a little flip here, but be very gentle with it because those gnocchi made are very soft and delicate. We don't want to smush them and get them all misshaped. Alright, and so that's it. I'm going to put it in a bowl, and then there you have potato gnocchi with ham and spring peas.